Hi, this is Jacob Nash, and this is a review of Module 5 about descriptive research. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only thing this is about. This is just, we're going to learn more in Module 6 about other kinds of research that can be done. Well, first, let's talk about theory and hypothesis. A theory is an explanation using a set of principles that organizes observations and predicts the behaviors of events. So pretty much it's just something that someone thinks, but it pretty much is useless without a hypothesis, which is a testable prediction, and it comes from a theory. After a hypothesis, there is an experiment or research that confirms or rejects the theory. This is the scientific method. So hopefully you've already learned about that before, but that's review. All right, let's talk about an operational definition. This is basically a statement that kind of shows procedures in a research study, but really what it is some kind of standard that someone has set that all other researchers can use to replicate an experiment. Replication is just being able to repeat the study with different situations to see the consistency of the results. So let's say this guy in 1919, he finds something, he makes the operational definition so that this guy in 2019 could use that. But here's an example of what operational definition might be. For someone to be sleep deprived, they have to have, they have to have 4 less hours of sleep than normal. So someone made that maybe, and then now all the other people can use that definition. All right, well, here are the different testing types. There's descriptive testing. That is just describing behaviors using studies or surveys. That's what we're going to talk about in a minute. There's correlational testing, and this is basically where you can just find relationships between things, correlations. Maybe you looked at that in algebra before. Experimental testing, this is just manipulating variables and discovering their effects. So that's when you have the independent and dependent variables. We're going to talk more about those last two in Module 6. Let's talk about a case study. What's a case study? Well, it's what it sounds like. It's just when a certain group or individual. So that's something, when you think case, you might think one person. Occasionally, it can be more than one person. But anyways, it can be studied in depth and hoping to find out something that is a ubiquitous principle. In other words, something that they can use for every research. So if they study a person, they find out, oh, this person has this sort of thing, then they can just say, well, now we know that that's what it's like for everyone. But they can be inaccurate because what if someone was out of the ordinary? Then it's inaccurate because it's not the same for everyone. So let me try to think of an example. Let's say someone, let's say this is just obviously not a real example, but let's say someone's being like examined or something and they are wearing a watch, and then someone just assumes like that now I know that everyone's going to have watches, which that's just a stupid example, but that's just going to show that sometimes they can be inaccurate. So just assuming that if one person is a certain way, then that's what it's like for everyone. All right, well, what's a naturalistic observation? This is, you're there, but you're not. So this is where you're trying to observe and record behavior naturally and naturally occurring situations without changing things to control situations. So basically this means it means that sorry about that. I had an interruption, but I was saying that let's say you're trying to investigate people. If they know they're being investigated, then they're going to change the way that they are because they know, oh, they're watching me, and they're not going to be like they normally would be. So you might not want to do what Jim Carrey here is doing. That would be noticeable if you're like driving in a car and almost crash. Maybe it's almost like spying. So that's what a naturalistic observation is. Okay, what about a survey? Well, I think you know what a survey is, but it's just a technique for finding out self-reported attitudes or behaviors in a certain group, sometimes by questioning. But it's super important how it's worded. You need to remember that. So let's say here's a survey for Jim Carrey. And I'm just using him. This doesn't have anything to do with him. I just have used him on videos before, so I just thought I'd use him again. So let's say he had a survey and he had to choose, I'm crazy, I need to go to an asylum, or I'm fine. Well, what do you think he's going to say? I'm fine. Who would say that they need to go to an asylum? I don't think anyone would say that. But if it was instead worded, I need some help, then maybe he would say that. He's like, oh. And once again, it doesn't have anything to do with him. I'm not saying he needs help. I'm just saying this is just a random example. But anyways, that's a survey. All right, a sampling bias. This is when there's flawed examples due to a lack of representation of a general population. So let's say they're trying to investigate these people here, and they're like, well, I see that some have blue hats on. I'll just get all 5 of those blue hat people, and I will just use them. Well, that's a sampling bias, because what if there's something different about those people that have the blue hats on, and that makes it inaccurate. So they need to instead pick the people as randomly as they can. That's what they need to do. So a population is just all those in a particular grouping study. We're not talking about like a population of America or something. A random sample, that's what I was saying. That's what you need to do. That is something that fairly represents the population by full inclusion and is more accurate. So let's say they gave all these people a number. So you're number 1, you're number 2, whatever. And then they draw the hats. Oh, they draw on the hat. All right, numbers 5, 7, and 11, or something like that. That's a random sample. That's better. A generalized study. This is just something that's accurate and it represents a full population and it can be replicated, similar to like what an operational definition can do. This can be replicated. That means other people can do it too. So if you have sampling bias, then the study will not be generalized, and that's not good. All right, let's look at some questions. And I apologize, I realized I forgot to put the module 4 questions on there, the review. So let's just do this. Hopefully you remember those. Remember with the Red Hot Chili Pepper things. So what is and remember, just, I guess I shouldn't say this anymore, but I can just assume that maybe you haven't watched any other ones. But just pause the video and then because I'm just going to go right ahead and show it. What is the tendency to believe after learning an outcome that one would have foreseen it? Well, that's in fact the hindsight bias. Create an example of humility. So obviously answers can vary, but here's an example. When researching the impacts of moving on children, early make sure to check for for errors in his work, and examines the thoughts of other scientists and their perspectives. That's a good thing. What is overconfidence? When people have more confidence and accuracy in their conclusions. All right, let's create an example of the hindsight bias. Once again, can vary. When the orchestra didn't practice, but still performed fine, the conductor claims he knew they would be successful all along nevertheless. Well, imagine if they didn't. Would he still say that? No. All right, now we're on the ones that have to do with this module. What is a random sample ensure? Remember the blue hats? We're not getting just the blue hats, people. We're getting any of the people. Blue hats or no blue hats. It ensures that there is a fair and adequate representation from a population. Why do researchers use precise operational definitions? They use them so that other scientists can replicate the research. What can cause the research study findings to not be generalized? Oh, remember I said? It's if there's a sampling bias. Create an example of naturalistic observation. Remember, that's like the spying. You're there, but you're not there. Early observes a group of students conversating while not being noticed, so the conversations are natural and as accurate as possible. Oh, you thought that was done? We have more. Create an example of a random sample. Early gathers 50 people and gives them each a number. He draws 10 numbers out of the hat and uses those 10 people to study. He does this specifically instead of choosing people or choosing the numbers himself. What is the disadvantage? And what that means is, what if you just said, I'll just choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, that's not a random sample because that's not random. You just chose that yourself. You also, it's not random to say 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Any sort of thing that's like there's a reason why you're choosing those numbers. It's got to be as random as possible. It could be that if you choose out of the hat, you happen to get those numbers, but it's got to be as random as possible. You didn't choose them. All right, what's the disadvantage of using the case study method? Remember, it can be inaccurate if someone is rare or out of the ordinary, and it's unrelatable to other people. What's the purpose of using operational definitions? It's to identify certain biases or to enable the replication of a study. What is a testable prediction? That is a hypothesis, and I don't know why it didn't show it. That's weird. Name the most important component of a survey. That is how it's worded. So once again, number 12 is hypothesis. I don't know why it didn't show it. But anyways, that would be it. There's no final slide, so whatever. Hopefully this helped. Thank you for watching.